Hello everyone. Please tell me, which city are you listening from? What time is it there? Is everything okay? Or does it feel like someone's watching you? I don't know how I got here. The bed was soft, colder than I was used to, and the sheets didn't smell like mine. My room had a familiar scent, fabric softener, old books, maybe even a little dust. This one, bleach. Hospital bleach, metallic, sterile. There were no windows. Just a lamp in the far corner, casting dim yellow light on white walls. At first, I thought I was dreaming. It had to be a dream, right? I had gone to sleep in my own bed, in my apartment, with my slippers tucked at the edge and my phone charging beside me, but now the ceiling was too low. The silence was too deep. The air was still. I sat up, confused but calm. My feet touched cold wooden floors. No rug, no furniture, except the lamp and the bed. I looked around for a door. There was none, just for blank walls. No exit. That's when I noticed something even stranger. My phone wasn't with me. My watch was gone. I looked down at myself. Same clothes, same bracelet my sister gave me. But when I stood up and turned to check behind the bed, I froze. There was a mirror, not a hanging one. No, this one was part of the wall. Seamless, tall. A perfect rectangle from floor to ceiling. I walked toward it and stared. My reflection was off. It was me, yes. But not completely. My head tilted differently. My eyes seemed darker, deeper. She blinked too late, too slow, like she wasn't quite synced. I raised my hand. She raised hers, but half a second late. And then she smiled. I didn't. I backed away slowly. That wasn't me. That thing in the mirror looked like me, but it wasn't. The light flickered once, then again. I turned to look at the lamp. It buzzed faintly, a low hum like a fly trapped in glass. Suddenly, a sound. 3 knocks. Not from the mirror, not from the lamp, but from inside the wall. Knock, knock, knock. I turned in a slow circle. Hello, I whispered. No answer. Then the mirror shimmered like water. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, the mirror rippled. And then she was gone. The reflection vanished. I looked down. My reflection was no longer matching. It was just not there. The mirror was now a window. I could see through it. And what I saw made my skin crawl. It was my bedroom. My real bedroom. My body. Lying there still, eyes closed. Was I dreaming, astral projecting? Dead? No. This wasn't death. This was something else. I put my hand on the glass. It was cold, solid. But on the other side, I watched my own chest rise and fall. I wasn't dead. I was asleep. Then she walked in me. The one from the mirror. She stood beside my sleeping body, brushed the hair from its forehead, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she turned her head sharply and looked directly at me, through the glass, through the dimensions, and smiled. The glass fogged up. Words appeared, drawn by invisible fingers. You're the dream now, I screamed. Hit the mirror, kicked it, but it wouldn't break. I was trapped. Behind me, the walls began to change. The white bled into gray. Black veins spread like mold, pulsating, moving. The lamp flickered out. Total darkness. When light returned, I wasn't alone. There were others in the room now. Figures, shadows. They had no faces, just outlines of people, still watching, breathing, but not alive. One of them stepped forward, held up a mirror shard, and pressed it into my hand. I didn't feel pain, but my hand began to bleed. On the floor, blood pooled into words. You stay until someone takes your place. I screamed again. No one heard. Time lost all meaning. The figures never moved. They watched me, studied me, whispered sometimes, in a language I didn't understand. I counted days and sleeps. 10, 15 more. The room changed with me, walls bending in, floors warping. The mirror showing flashes of other people's lives. Each night, a new bed. A new person falling asleep. A chance. Each time, the girl me but not me would step through and take their place. And someone else would join us. Another figure. Another prisoner. Another dreamer turned real. One night, a baby appeared on the other side, alone in a crib. The girl entered again, this time in the shape of a mother. I tried to scream, to stop her, but my voice made no sound. The crib turned to flames. Then it was gone. Another time, I saw an old man shaving. The girl stepped into his reflection, whispered something. The razor slipped. Blood everywhere. I begged the mirror, let me out, let me go. But it only shimmered. Then, I saw you. Yes, you reading this. Your reflection isn't quite right either, is it? Maybe just a half-second late. Maybe a twitch you didn't make. Don't blink. Don't look away. She's coming. And when you sleep tonight, check the bed. Because if it's not yours, and the air smells like bleach, you've already taken my place. It started with a simple routine. Thomas couldn't sleep for weeks. After his wife died, the silence of the house became unbearable. The soft hum of the ceiling fan, the creak of the floorboards, the wind through the trees, everything reminded him that he was alone. Grief has a way of turning the night into a mirror, reflecting back every thought you try to bury during the day. A friend suggested a method, counting backward. Start from 100. Count backward slowly. Let your brain go quiet, they said. It worked. For the first time in weeks, Thomas slept. But something strange happened on the fourth night. He began counting as usual, 199, 98. By the time he reached 70, the air in the room felt heavier. The ceiling fan stuttered. It made a sound like someone exhaling sharply. He paused, then laughed at himself. You're just tired, he whispered, and kept counting. 67, 66, 65. The room darkened slightly, as if the shadows grew thicker. He squinted. The outline of the wardrobe seemed closer than before. He hadn't moved it, but he chalked it up to tricks of light. On the sixth night, something new. When he reached 50, he heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, just outside his bedroom. He got up to check, but the hallway was empty. He returned, continued counting, 41, 48. A whisper. It came from under the bed. A breathless, broken voice repeating numbers with him. But it always stayed one step ahead. If he said 47, it would whisper 46. By the eighth night, he was afraid to sleep. Not because he couldn't, but because he now had to count. His body wouldn't let him sleep otherwise. He tried to stay awake, drank coffee, walked all night, even tried sleeping in the bathtub. But every time he closed his eyes without counting, he would jolt awake to a blinding headache and a voice hissing numbers in reverse. He tried changing the number. Start from 200, he thought. But something changed. On the 12th night. At 173, he wasn't in his bedroom anymore. He didn't fall asleep. He just blinked, and the room changed. The walls were wet, covered in long scratch marks. A low-frequency hum filled the air. The wardrobe was there, but it was open and deeper than before. Far too deep. He walked toward it, trembling. Inside was a staircase, spiraling downward, and on the wall next to it, written in what looked like faded blood, "To rest is to descend." He ran, back to the bed, back to his breath, back to his numbers. But now every night the descent continued. Each number he counted led him deeper. The room around him would twist subtly. New doorways would appear. Walls would stretch. Mirrors would reflect versions of him that didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't stop smiling. Then came night 20. At number 10, the mirror in front of his bed turned pitch black. Not reflective, just a solid void. He stared at it. It stared back. From the black surface, two pale hands pressed against the glass. Then a face his own, but older. Bloated eyes completely white, mouth stitched shut. It mouthed something. He tried to look away, but he couldn't. His body was paralyzed. His mouth still moved. 7, 6, 5. The mirror self smiled wider. Blood dripped from the corners of its sewn lips. When he reached 0, he didn't fall asleep. He fell through the bed, through the floor, through something not made of this world. It was like gravity had changed, like he was being pulled towards something older, something hungrier than death. He woke up, gasping, on cold concrete. The floor was covered in numbers, scratched endlessly into the ground with fingernails. Thousands of them, all descending. He stood up and saw others, people curled in corners, rocking back and forth, whispering numbers, trapped in loops. Some had reached negative thousands. Others just screamed. One woman kept biting her fingers every time she reached 50. A man scribbled invisible numbers into the air until his fingers bled. One figure in the back wasn't moving. Thomas approached. It was him. Another him. Eyes open, mouth slightly parted, whispering negative 12,904. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. He blinked, and suddenly, he was back in his bed, sweating, shaking. He looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. The fan had stopped. His mouth moved on its own. 199, he sobbed. Because now, he couldn't stop. He had to count. Every night. And every number dragged him closer to that place. That endless room, with no time, no sleep, just counting downward. He tried calling his sister, but when she answered, all she heard was static. Behind the static, a voice whispering numbers. She thought it was a prank. 2 days later, she visited. Thomas was gone. His bed was there, still made, but the mattress was unusually cold. The mirror in the room was pitch black, like it had absorbed all the light. She took a photo of it. Later, when she looked at the photo, Thomas was in the mirror, eyes white, mouth open, holding up 2 fingers. She didn't know what it meant, but we do. Because tonight, she's having trouble sleeping, and she's decided to try something. Something a friend once told her. Start from 100. Count backward slowly. Let your brain go quiet. It started with a name I didn't recognize. Every night before falling asleep, I whispered it. I don't know why. I never meant to say it out loud. It was like a habit that formed on its own, unconscious, involuntary, and quiet. I would lie in bed, eyes heavy, and just before drifting off, I'd murmur softly, Emmeline. No one I knew had that name. I wasn't reading about anyone named Emmeline. I'd never met anyone with that name in my life. But it slipped off. My lips like a breath I didn't know I was holding. I didn't even notice I was doing it until about the fourth night. And the moment I really noticed, everything changed. I live alone in a small apartment in the city. The building is old, creaks when it settles, but I liked that. It felt like it had a soul, a quiet history that didn't scream at me like the chaos of downtown. I'm not a particularly social person. My life was routine, work, food, books, sleep. But after Emmeline's name started escaping my lips, I began dreaming. Not the usual sort of dreams. These were cold, still colorless, like I was underwater in a house I didn't recognize. Old wallpaper, dusty curtains, wooden floors that moaned under pressure. A ticking clock that never showed its hands. I always stood in the hallway. The air was thick, heavy, and at the end of the hallway, a room, the door slightly open, faint white light spilling through the crack. And behind the door, someone whispered, "You came back." The first time I woke up with my heart racing, I brushed it off. Just a weird dream, I thought. But the next night, the same hallway, the same door, the same voice. By the third night, I could hear the name again, but not from my lips, from the other side of the door whispered, inviting Emmeline. One morning, I noticed something strange. My pillow was damp, not just from sweat. It was like tears. My cheeks felt sticky, and I couldn't remember crying. The bed sheets were slightly twisted, as though someone else had moved around it. I started recording myself at night, thinking maybe I was sleepwalking or talking in my sleep. I placed my phone near my bed and recorded audio. The first night it captured nothing but shifting sounds. The second night, I heard myself whisper her name, but on the third night, the voice wasn't mine. It was softer, older, female. I missed you. I didn't sleep the night after that. I tried searching the name Emmeline. Nothing relevant. No books, no recent news, no local history. I even asked my mother if it was a childhood friend or some family story. She shook her head. Never heard that name before. Sounds old-fashioned. That week, things escalated. Doors that were closed at night would be open by morning. My bedroom mirror, which I'd always left clean, began to fog up during the night. But there was no moisture in the room. No heater, no reason. And sometimes there were fingerprints. Thin, long, and too many. Like someone had dragged a hand down the mirror from the inside. Then came the night where the dream changed. This time, I wasn't just in the hallway. I was inside the room. It was a nursery, pale blue walls. A broken rocking chair in the corner. A crib, old and splintered, sat in the center. Everything covered in a layer of dust. But there, just above the crib, was a picture frame. The glass was shattered, but the nameplate was intact. Emmeline Gray, 1948. In the dream, I reached toward the picture. The rocking chair creaked. I turned, and she was there, a small girl, maybe 6. Pale skin, thin dress, eyes too wide, too knowing. Her mouth didn't move, but I heard her say, "You promised you wouldn't leave again." I woke up screaming, for the first time. In years, I packed a bag and left my apartment in the middle of the night. I booked a hotel across town. I didn't care about work. I didn't care about anything except escaping whatever was happening to me. But she followed. In the hotel room, as I was finally drifting off, exhausted, eyes barely staying open, I felt it again. That pull, that name, it came out of me, unwillingly. Emmaine, I slapped my hand over my mouth. But it was too late. I heard it again, from the corner of the room. "I hear you now." The following nights were worse. Wherever I went, I dreamed of the same house. But now, it decayed more with each visit. The floorboards cracked. The windows were gone. And the clock at the end of the hallway, its hands had returned. They pointed to 313. Always. I started finding drawings in my apartment, under my pillow, on my fridge drawn in crayon. Childish drawings of a house, a girl, and someone in a bed. Sometimes, the stick figure was crossed out. Other times, it was surrounded by dark scribbles. I never owned crayons. I tried not saying her name. I fought the urge every night, covered my mouth, wrote other words down to distract myself, but my lips moved anyway, like I wasn't in control anymore. And now she speaks back, every time. Sometimes I hear humming a lullaby I can't recognize. Sometimes I wake up in places I didn't fall asleep. Once, I opened my eyes and saw the hallway from the dream. But this time, I was awake. I ran to the kitchen, turned on all the lights, and screamed. Nothing, empty. But the smell of baby powder lingered. I've stopped recording. I've stopped writing. I barely eat. I barely sleep. Every night I feel her closer. Not angry, not malicious, just present, constant, cold. Last night, I woke up holding a stuffed bear. One I've never seen before. Its fur was old, stitched. On its chest, the name M was sewn in fading thread. Tonight, I'll sleep again. I'll whisper the name, because I know I can't fight it anymore. Maybe I'm not meant to escape her. Maybe I called her without meaning to. Maybe she was waiting for someone, and I was foolish enough to speak her name. Now, every night, she waits for me to say it. Just once, and I always do. I started using a sleep mask after I moved into the new apartment. The curtains were thin, and the streetlight outside glared through the window like an unblinking eye. The landlord promised they'd be replaced. Of course, they never were, but I didn't mind. The mask helped me sleep, and that's all I needed. At first, everything felt normal. A quiet one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of an old brick building downtown. Cracked ceilings, humming pipes, dusty hallway, but cheap rent was rare. And I wasn't going to complain. The first night, I laid down, pulled the mask over my eyes, and welcomed the warm silence. A silence so complete it almost hummed in my ears. At 2:54 a.m., I woke up. Not because of a noise, but something else, a presence. The kind that prickles your skin before you even open your eyes. But I didn't remove the mask. I just lay still, ears straining in the darkness. There was no sound, no movement, yet I felt someone standing near the bed, watching. I told myself it was just the paranoia of being in a new place. I slept again. The next night was worse. I woke again, around the same time. This time there was breathing, shallow, slow, not mine. I held my breath just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. It continued, inhale, exhale, inhale, right by the side of my bed. I ripped the mask off. No one. The room was just as I left it. My nightstand lamp, the stack of books, the mirror near the door, my phone blinking softly on the desk. But the air was heavy, stale, like someone had stood there for a long, long time. I stopped wearing the mask after that. For a few nights I slept fine, though restlessly. No more breathing, no more waking up at 2:54 a.m. Maybe my mind had adjusted, but I missed the deep sleep the mask used to give me. One night, craving that uninterrupted blackness, I gave in and wore it again. Big mistake. At exactly 2:54 a.m., I woke again. But this time, I couldn't move. I wasn't paralyzed, I just knew not to. My arms were tucked under the blanket, my face still under the mask, and my breathing shallow, because I felt it. The presence wasn't just beside me. It was closer, leaning, watching. Inches away, I could feel the warmth like breath on skin. But the room was dead cold. And then, the whisper. Not in words, not language, just a vibration, a rustle, a hum, almost in tune with the silence. I reached up slowly and removed the mask. No one there. I sat up, heart pounding, and in the dim reflection of the black TV screen across the room, I saw something move behind me, a shape, tall, leaning too tall. I turned, nothing. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day I noticed something odd. The mirror near the door had a small fingerprint. I lived alone. I rarely touched it. And the print was too long, as if someone with stretched fingers had pressed against it slowly. I scrubbed it clean. That night, I didn't plan to wear the mask, but I fell asleep before I could stop myself. I woke up at 2:54 a.m. again. This time, I felt weight on the bed. A slow indentation, like knees pressing, as if something were crawling toward me. I froze. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to not see it. I tore the mask off. Nothing, but the blanket was wrinkled, disturbed in places I hadn't moved. I checked the door, locked. I checked the window, still shut, but something was there. I bought a motion-activated camera the next day, put it on my desk, facing the bed. I figured maybe I could prove to myself that nothing was happening. I wore the mask again that night. Same time, same feeling. This time I heard whispering, actual words. Don't look, keep them shut. We like you better this way. I jolted up, pulled the mask, and turned on the lamp. Silence, no one. I checked the footage in the morning. It stopped recording at 2:54 a.m. Picked back up at 3:11. The timestamp blinked, and then it resumed, showing me sleeping peacefully. No movement, no disturbance. But in one frame, at the edge of the camera view, something changed. There was a smudge. A silhouette, faint, like a blur in motion, but stretched vertically. Like it was leaning into the frame, just enough to be seen. Just enough to know it wanted to be seen. I stopped sleeping altogether for 2 days. Stayed awake, chugged coffee, kept every light on. I was unraveling. But it wasn't sleep deprivation. I knew I wasn't imagining it. On the third night, exhausted and half-mad, I gave up. I wore the mask. 2:54 a.m. I woke up, and this time, something touched my face. A finger, cold, thin, it tapped my forehead. "We're here," I screamed and ripped the mask off. No one. I backed away from the bed, heart clawing at my chest. The room was unchanged, but the mask lay on the floor, facing up, with a fresh fingerprint in the center. Not a human print. Something too long. Something with too many joints. I threw the mask away, moved into the living room, slept on the couch, never closed my eyes fully, but I started seeing them anyway. Reflections, corners behind the glass door, on the balcony at night, thin figures, heads tilted slightly, watching me. They hated when I looked back. That much I could feel. They fed on blindness. I realized something chilling. The mask wasn't blocking the world out. It was opening a door for them to come in. Because when I stopped looking, they came closer. Now, I can't sleep at all. They stand at the window sometimes. They crawl across the ceiling. They whisper beneath the floorboards. The only thing they want is for me to put the mask back on. And I'm scared that one night, I will. Because the sleep mask blocks my sight, but not theirs. The first time it happened, I blamed it on the pills. I'd just moved into a new apartment on the edge of town, a cold, echoing place with tall windows and empty rooms. I was still adjusting to the silence. No traffic, no voices, no neighbors, above or below, just me and a second-hand mattress on the floor. I remember taking a mild sleeping aid around 10 p.m. The night was still. I had my little white noise machine and a faint static hum to help me sleep. And then, I woke up. But I wasn't in my apartment. The room was smaller. The bed felt firmer. The ceiling had water stains I didn't recognize. My window faced a dense patch of trees, not the streetlights of my usual view. I sat up, disoriented, and I realized this wasn't my home. This bed was not mine. This house was not mine. I stumbled to my feet, dizzy, heart pounding. The hallway outside the room was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb. There were pictures on the wall, portraits, oil paintings of people I'd never seen, dressed in clothes from another century. Their eyes followed me as I moved, not figuratively. I mean, they shifted. I ran to the front door. It wouldn't open. The knobs were there, but no lock, no bolt. It just wouldn't move. I turned and saw the portrait at the end of the hall. A woman in a gray dress, head slightly tilted, pale skin, black eyes. Her mouth was almost smiling. Her eyes were not on me when I first saw her, but now they were. I backed into a room and shut the door. It was a nursery. A crib sat in the corner. A rocking horse. A cracked mirror hung above a tiny dresser. It smelled like old talcum powder and something else. Something damp. There was a baby monitor on the dresser. Old analog, one of those static channel types from the 90s, and it was on. I hadn't touched it, but the screen was flickering, static. Then, movement. 2 tiny white dots appeared in the crib on the monitor, too far apart to be reflections. They blinked. I turned around slowly, heart galloping. The crib was empty, but I felt the air shift, like someone was now behind me, where no one should be. The next thing I remember, I was waking up again in my real apartment. Sunlight streaming in through the windows. White noise machines still humming beside me. Was it a dream? Maybe. I tried to forget it. For days I didn't sleep. I drank coffee, watched TV, slept with lights on. Then I fell asleep again, not even realizing it. And when I woke, the same house, same bed, same hallway, same portraits. Only this time the nursery door was open, and the crib was rocking. No baby, just movement. I turned to run back to the bedroom where I'd arrived, but something new was waiting. A woman, the woman from the portrait, standing in the hallway, just standing, not moving, watching. Her mouth moved, but I heard nothing. She turned her head slowly and pointed behind me. I turned the mirror. It was fogged. Words appeared, written across the glass. You left her. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't leave anyone. I lived alone. I always had. Then I closed my eyes. I don't know why, and I still saw her. Even with my eyes shut, her silhouette stayed burned into my vision, as if she wasn't being seen with eyes, but something deeper, something primal. When I opened them again, she was gone, but the reflection in the mirror wasn't mine. The next day, I threw out the white noise machine, but that night, I still heard it, even with it gone, even with the power cut. A low static hum. Then, beneath it screaming, distant, garbled, a woman's voice, crying, pleading, sometimes calling a name, sometimes whispering, "Don't leave her." I tried recording it. Nothing came through. Only when I listened in real time did I hear it. Was I going insane? Or was something trying to reach me? I set up cameras, one in my bedroom, one in the hallway. I fell asleep. This time I saw it on footage. At 3:13 a.m., the door creaked open. A woman walked in. The camera glitched. Then a small figure crawled in behind her. Something hunched. Something with wide, white eyes. They stood over me as I slept. I never stirred. The woman leaned close to my ear. Then they vanished. Frame by frame, just gone. A week later, I was brushing my teeth, looking into the mirror. Same routine. Foam around my mouth. Sleep in my eyes. And then I saw her behind me. But I couldn't move. I just watched, paralyzed. She tilted her head. Her eyes so black, they looked like holes in her face. She reached for me. I blinked. She was still there. Another blink. She was closer when I finally turned around. The room was empty. But the mirror wasn't showing me anymore. It was her, brushing her teeth, with a smile too wide. I haven't slept in 4 days now, but I can still hear the white noise, still hear the screaming, still feel her presence every time I close my eyes. Sometimes I wake up on the floor, sometimes in the hallway, but I know it's only a matter of time before I open my eyes again and find myself back in that house. The different house, with the crib, with the portraits, with the woman who won't stop whispering, "You left her, you left her, you left her." Maybe one night, I won't wake up in my bed at all. Maybe I never did. Maybe this is her dream now, and I'm just part of it. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, unremarkable day that slips past unnoticed. The kind of day you'd never think would be your last normal one. Alina had been living alone in her small one-bedroom apartment for 5 months. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers after a messy breakup. And the suffocating grief of losing her father, she needed solitude, peace, a chance to breathe. The apartment gave her that. Nestled on the third floor of an old, aging building, it came with creaky floors, stained walls, and the quietest neighbors she'd ever had. Almost too quiet. But it was affordable. And for Alina, silence was a blessing. She'd spent the last few weeks redecorating thrift store paintings. Plants along the window, a vintage lamp, and a wide mahogany bed she'd inherited from her father's farmhouse. That bed, it was old, heavy, carved from dark wood, the kind that looks like it remembers things. It had always been in the family, passed down for generations. It stood rooted in the center of the bedroom, facing the window like it had some unspoken preference. She had kept it that way, perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of routine, but lately, she'd started feeling off. It began with the drafts. She would feel a sudden chill at night, like someone had opened a window, even when everything was shut tight. Then came the sounds, faint dragging, low wooden creaks, and sometimes soft taps, rhythmic like distant footsteps, always around 3 a.m. At first, she assumed it was the building pipes, rats, old plumbing, but it only happened in her bedroom, and it always stopped the moment she turned on the light. That Tuesday, she had trouble sleeping. The draft was worse than usual, and the air felt oddly thick. She shifted under her blanket, eyes locked on the ceiling, until finally, out of irritation more than anything else, she sat up and muttered, "This bed's in the wrong place." Something had been bothering her about the layout anyway. Maybe feng shui, or just boredom. She decided to move it. It took nearly an hour to shift the massive wooden frame against the far wall. She cleared dust, wiped the old floor marks, and rearranged her side table. When she was done, the room felt wider, airier, even lighter. She smiled. It felt like a small triumph, a breath of fresh energy. She slept better that night, but the next morning, things began to shift. Her alarm clock didn't go off. The milk in the fridge had curdled overnight, though it was fresh yesterday. Her bathroom mirror had a faint smudged handprint, too high to be hers. She didn't panic, just shrugged it off. "Weird morning," she whispered, that night. While reading in bed, she felt something different. The air felt denser again, the silence heavier. The warmth of the room felt like it was watching her. She paused, placed her book down, and listened. The floor creaked, one slow stretch, like something was shifting its weight. She exhaled and turned on the light. Nothing. She walked around, checked the hallway, the kitchen, the lock. Everything was fine, except when she returned to her room, her bed had moved. Just an inch, barely noticeable, but enough. Enough to know she hadn't imagined it. She laughed nervously. "I must have nudged it," she muttered aloud, but she knew she hadn't. She went to bed with her heart thudding a little faster. At exactly 3 a.m., she woke to the feeling of pressure on her chest. Not pain, not fear, just presence, like something was leaning on her without touching her. She couldn't move for several seconds. Her eyes scanned the dark, darting 2 corners. There was no one. The next day she tried to ignore it. Routine helped work. Groceries, podcasts, anything to pretend the night hadn't felt so wrong. That evening, she returned to find her bed back in the original position, centered in the room, facing the window. She stood frozen in the doorway. She hadn't moved it. No one else had the key. No signs of forced entry. Nothing stolen. No disturbance, except the bed. She didn't touch it that night. She slept on the couch. The following morning, she decided to call a locksmith and change the locks, just in case. Maybe someone had come in. Maybe she was overthinking, sleep-deprived, hallucinating. But that night, when she returned, her couch cushions were all on the floor, stacked neatly in her bed. Her bed looked untouched, not unmade, not rumpled, untouched, like no one had laid on it in years. She stood there for a long time. She moved the bed again, and again the next night. Each time, she returned to find it centered, always perfectly placed, facing the window. She tried ignoring it, until the night she woke to the whisper. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't even clear. Just a breathless hush near her ear as she drifted to sleep. Something like, "Put it back." She sat up, heart hammering, sweat cold on her back. Her room was empty. The window was open, but she hadn't opened it. The wind pushed the curtains softly, rhythmically, like someone breathing behind them. That night, she slept with all the lights on. She researched everything: haunted furniture, cursed heirlooms, psychological tricks, sleep paralysis. Some articles talked about residual energy in objects, especially ones passed down. Old wood holds memory, they said. Some even suggested that disrupting an object's habitual alignment could disturb that memory. Could the bed remember? The next night, she moved the bed again, but this time she filmed it. Set up her phone on a tripod. Full battery, lights off. She went to sleep on the floor. When she woke at 7:30 a.m., the camera was on the ground. Screen cracked. Video corrupted. And the bed was back, centered. She hadn't even heard it move. That morning, she noticed a line of dust across the floor, a perfect circle, like something had revolved around the bed in the middle of the night, as if pacing. She decided to sleep at a hotel. She came home 2 days later. The moment she entered the apartment, she felt it. Stillness, like air held in a jar. And the bed was not centered. It was shifted just a few inches off to the side, like something was inviting her to adjust it. She did back to center. The next few days were peaceful. The air felt lighter again. No whispers. No movements. No cold drafts. But Alina couldn't shake the feeling that she had agreed to something. That night, she lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling. She whispered, "Are you alive?" The silence felt expectant. She blinked slowly. From the hallway came a soft creak, a familiar stretch of floorboard. She turned on the light. Nothing but... As she looked at the mirror on her wall, something was different. Her reflection blinked after she did. And behind her, just behind her shoulder, in the mirror, the bed pulsed. Not moved, pulsed, like a slow, heavy breath. She didn't turn around. Not that night. Not ever again. Now she lives like the bed wants, centered facing the window, never disturbed. And every morning she wakes up grateful to be above the mattress, not beneath it. Because she knows now, some beds aren't meant to be moved. Some furniture prefers you silent, and some things are only asleep because you let them be. I never believed in sleep rules. All those internet myths. Don't sleep with your feet uncovered. Don't look in the mirror after midnight. Don't whistle at night. I laughed them off. I always thought horror lived in the mind, not under the bed. But that was before I moved into apartment 3B. The lease was cheap. Too cheap. A high-rise in the city, quiet neighborhood, top floor, fully furnished. I should have suspected something, but I was tired. I needed a change. My breakup had left me emotionally raw, and the idea of silence and space appealed to me. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked slowly, got into a routine. Wake up, work remotely, order food, sleep late. The apartment was ordinary beige walls, creaky floors, a faint scent of cedar, and an oddly comforting ticking from the old analog wall clock in the bedroom. It ticked softly, methodically. Then came the night I woke up at 3:11 a.m. I remember it because of the clock. I opened my eyes suddenly, like something had pulled me awake. The red digits on the alarm read 3:11. I lay there in the dark, confused, heart slowly calming. The air felt cold, heavier somehow. Still, I thought nothing of it. But then I rolled over. I don't know why. It wasn't discomfort. It wasn't a noise. It was instinct, like an invisible finger had gently tapped my shoulder. As I turned onto my side, I felt it, a rush of warmth, like passing through a patch of sunlight. Only I was in a cold, dark room. I drifted back to sleep within seconds. The next night, it happened again. Eyes opened, 3:11. Rollover, warmth, sleep. By the fourth night, it stopped being coincidence. I started keeping track. I set up my phone to record. I even tried fighting the urge to roll over. That was a mistake. The night I didn't roll over, everything changed. At 3:11 a.m., I woke up like usual. The clock blinked at me. I stared at the ceiling and told myself not to move. Seconds passed, then minutes. The ticking of the wall clock grew louder, like it was in my ear. The air changed. My skin prickled. Something was wrong. Then I heard it. A faint shuffle. Then a breath. Hot, slow. Right behind me. I was lying on my right side, still as stone. The breath came again, deliberate, inhaling near my neck. It wasn't mine. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then I heard a low, almost playful whisper, "Turn around." I bolted out of bed, flicked every light on, heart thudding against my ribs. No one was there, no signs of entry. My phone, corrupted recording. Just static. After that, I didn't skip rolling over again, not once. Each night, 3:11 a.m., I would open my eyes, roll to the other side, and the warmth would return. Strange, but familiar. Almost protective. Almost conditional. Then came the dream. I stood in the bedroom, watching myself sleep. My eyes were open, unblinking, mouth slightly open. A dark figure stood behind the bed, not moving, not breathing, just watching me. I felt the same pressure in the dream that I did every night, something holding back, something waiting. When I woke up, I was on the floor. My nose was bleeding. The clock read 3:13 a.m. I had missed it. The room was ice cold. I didn't sleep for 2 days. When I finally gave in to exhaustion, I set 5 alarms for 3:10 a.m. But the power cut out that night. I woke up at 3:17 a.m., facing the ceiling, paralyzed. A shadow hovered above me, Not touching, not speaking, just there. Then a whisper right beside my ear, dry and sharp. Last warning. I moved out the next morning. Slept in my car for a week. It's been 6 months since I left apartment 3B. I don't know who lives there now, or if it's even rented. I don't want to know. But I still wake up sometimes at 3:11 a.m. on the dot, with the overwhelming need to roll over. And every time I do, I feel that warmth behind me. That sigh of relief. That reminder, you followed the rule. I don't know what happens if I don't, but I never plan to find out. It was 11:52 p.m. The rain had slowed outside, a soft drizzle tapping against the windows of our little countryside home. A faint scent of lavender drifted in from the candle Sarah had lit an hour ago. Everything about that night felt calm, warm tea, dim lights. The final minutes of a rainy Friday winding down, and then she said it. Good night, love. I'll see you in the... Her words stopped, mid-sentence. Her mouth was half open, her voice still in the air, but she didn't move. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She just stood there, still frozen. Sarah, I whispered, my voice barely escaping my throat. She didn't answer. Her eyes stared through me like I wasn't there. My stomach turned. I gently reached out to touch her arm, and it was cold. Not the cold of being in a chilly room, but cold like stone. Like death, Sarah, I repeated, shaking her lightly. No response. Then, like a marionette whose strings had just been reattached, she twitched. Her eyes blinked rapidly. She took a shallow breath and looked at me, confused. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked. I just stared at her. You stopped, I said. You were saying good night, and then you just stopped. Froze. You weren't breathing. She laughed. But it wasn't her usual laugh. It felt too quick, too timed. What? No, I didn't. You must be tired. And with that, she turned and walked into the bedroom. I didn't follow. Right away. I stood there for several minutes, staring at the hallway where she disappeared. There had been something off in her eyes, something blank, like a shadow wearing her face. I barely slept that night. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Made coffee, read her book, smiled the way she always did. I convinced myself it must have been some sort of hallucination or sleep state glitch in my brain. Maybe I was tired, but that night something else happened. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed something move in the mirror behind me. It wasn't Sarah. It was someone standing in the hallway. Their silhouette was nearly identical to hers, but the posture was wrong, too rigid, the head tilted just slightly too far. I turned around. No one there. When I looked back in the mirror, the figure was gone. Over the next week, the incidents escalated. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find Sarah sitting at the edge of the bed, perfectly still, eyes wide open, staring at the corner of the room. I'd call her name, and after a delay, she'd turn and smile. It's okay, she'd whisper. Go back to sleep. One morning I woke up, and she was already in the kitchen. Only, she didn't greet me. She was staring out the window. Did you sleep okay? I asked. She turned. Of course, you didn't hear her last night. She blinked slowly. The woman in the hallway. I froze. I dreamt about her, she added. She was standing in the dark, watching us. Her hands were too long, her smile too wide. Then she laughed again. that same rehearsed laugh, as if it was being played from a recording. I started recording her, every night, hidden cameras, voice recorders, and what I found made me sick. At exactly 3:17 a.m. every night, she would wake up, eyes open instantly, no stirring, no movement, just open. Then, she would sit up, walk slowly to the hallway, stand there. Sometimes she whispered to someone not there. Other times, she mimicked me, said my name, stroked the air as if petting an invisible animal. And one night, she stared directly into the camera. Eyes wide, lips parting just enough to let out a whisper. "He can see me now." I showed her the footage. She didn't believe it. That is until she watched herself looking into the lens and saying those words. She dropped the mug in her hands and stepped back, nearly falling over. "That's not me," she said. I don't remember any of this." "We need help," I said. "A doctor, a priest, something." But Sarah shook her head. No. If we talk about her, she listens." I didn't understand. "She's always been here," she whispered. "I just didn't remember. But now I do. I remember being 6. Talking to someone in the dark. I thought it was my imagination." "What does she want?" I asked. "She wants to live again," Sarah said, her voice trembling through me. That night, Sarah didn't come to bed. I found her in the hallway facing the wall, muttering something under her breath. Over and over, she said goodnight. She said goodnight. She said goodnight. I grabbed her shoulders, spun her around. Her eyes were completely black, not figuratively, literally, as if her pupils had swallowed everything. She said goodnight, she whispered once more, before collapsing in my arms. She was never the same again. She went silent. Days passed where she barely blinked, barely ate. And then one night I woke up to her standing beside the bed, staring at me. "She wants you now," she said softly. The lights in the room began to flicker. I tried to move, but I couldn't. Paralyzed. She climbed onto the bed, sat next to me. "She said goodnight," she whispered, as the temperature in the room dropped and everything turned dark. I woke up screaming, but I wasn't in our house. I was in a room I didn't recognize. Old wallpaper, dust in the air, a rotting ceiling, and in the corner was the same woman, tall, pale, smiling with too many teeth. Her hands dragged against the wall as she walked toward me and Sarah. She stood next to her, hand in hand. She said goodnight, Sarah whispered. Again, eyes hollow. "You didn't listen." I screamed as they stepped forward, and then I woke up, in our bed. But Sarah was gone. The room was cold, and on the mirror, written in fog, were 3 words. "You said nothing." That was 2 weeks ago. Sarah was never found. I check the hallway every night. I unplug all the lights. I don't sleep, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear her voice. Not from the bedroom. Not from the hallway. From inside the mirror. She said goodnight. It began with something simple. One morning, I woke up in a different bed. Not just a different bed. A different house. I sat upright in confusion. The sheets unfamiliar, starchy, and cold. The sunlight falling through the window didn't match what I was used to. It was pale, watery, and filtered through heavy curtains that I knew I had never bought. I blinked, trying to recall if I had gone drinking the night before, or maybe stayed over at a friend's place. But everything was blank. My last memory was falling asleep in my own room, in my own bed, with the TV on low and the cat curled beside me. This wasn't my room, and this definitely wasn't my bed. The wallpaper was floral, faded, and peeling. In the corners, the smell was musty, like damp books and closed closets. I swung my feet over the edge and stood cautiously. My socks brushed against cold wooden floorboards. I called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" No answer, only the soft, low hum of silence that somehow felt alive. I walked to the window, pulled the curtain back. Unfamiliar trees, a narrow gravel road, a rusted fence, no streetlights, no parked cars, nothing. I opened the door to the hallway and froze. Portraits, the walls were lined with old haunting. Portraits, men and women in heavy frames, all dressed in black or gray, faces pale, stiff with expressionless eyes that seemed off. They weren't looking straight ahead. Every single one of them seemed to be slightly looking to the side, slightly toward me. I walked past them, slowly, their glass-covered eyes trailing me as I moved. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, until I blinked, and one of the portraits had turned, not entirely, just the head. It was facing me now. I backed away, my heart racing, unable to understand what I had seen. I turned my head, then looked again, and it was back in its original pose. That was the first moment I felt the presence, like someone else was awake in the house, but not walking, just watching. I reached what looked like a bathroom and stared at my reflection, except it blinked, but my reflection didn't. I staggered back, heart thundering. I leaned closer. My reflection was slightly delayed. It copied my every move, but with a fraction of a second's lag, and the smile it showed, I swear, wasn't the one I made. I closed the mirror cabinet, hoping it would fix itself. It didn't. I heard a soft thump behind me. I spun around. No one. But the blanket on the bed in the next room had moved. I walked in slowly. The blanket was folded when I had last seen it. Now, it was crumpled, shaped as if someone had just gotten out of bed. The air in the room was cold, colder than it should have been. And in the corner of the room, my cat was sitting there, frozen, staring at the far corner. I called to him. He didn't move, just sat there, eyes wide and locked on an empty patch of wall. I waved my hand in front of his face. No response. I picked him up and he hissed something he never does. The moment I turned to leave, he leaped out of my arms and rushed back to the same spot, staring again. I closed the door, unnerved. In the hallway, I saw it, the baby monitor. A screen, faintly glowing. Except there was no baby, and I didn't own a monitor. I stepped closer. The image on the screen was of a crib. An old one, wooden, empty, but not quite. In the far edge of the night vision glow, a glint to glints, eyes blinking, watching, not moving, just staring. I unplugged it. The screen stayed on. At this point, I told myself, this is a dream. It has to be a dream. I just need to sleep again, and I'll wake up in my own house. I tried to lie down. I pulled the blanket over my head. A habit I hadn't done since childhood, but it made me feel safer. Until it moved. Not slowly. It jerked downward, like hands grabbing it from the outside. I screamed and kicked, throwing the blanket away, but there was no one there, just the cold air, the watching silence, and the sense that something had tried to reach me. I ran down the hallway, past the portraits, through the kitchen, out the door, into the trees. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get away from the house. I ran for what felt like hours, through fog and branches, through thick grass and over fences, until I collapsed. And when I opened my eyes, I was back in bed. My own bed. The cat was beside me. The morning sun was warm. The walls were familiar. Everything normal. I wanted to cry from relief. I chalked it up to a nightmare, a vivid, terrifying hallucination. Maybe sleep paralysis. Maybe a dream. Within a dream, until I walked into the bathroom, and the reflection in the mirror was still delayed, and the portrait I never owned now hung in the hallway, a woman in black, head slightly tilted, staring just past me, and on the nightstand, the baby monitor was back, glowing softly, showing the crib, still empty, except for the eyes, watching, always watching, waiting for 3 a.m. I was never superstitious, not even when my grandmother told me old stories of things that happen at night, things that crawl through dreams, things that only come when the mind is too tired to resist. I always brushed her off. Just folk tales. Stories to keep children obedient. But now, I wish I had listened. It started about a month after I moved into the new apartment. A simple studio near the city. Nothing special. White walls. Single window. Creaky floorboards. Cheap rent. The kind of place you take when you're starting over. And I was. New city. New job. New life. At first, the sleeplessness was just stress. That's what I told myself. But there was something else, something I couldn't name. I would lie in bed, eyes wide open, and feel watched. Not just paranoia, not nerves, watched. And not from the window or the door. From inside the room. The first time it happened. I was drifting halfway between wakefulness and sleep. I had just blinked, slowly, letting the exhaustion pull me under. But then, something shifted in the room. The air got cold. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen stopped. Even the traffic outside sounded distant, muffled, and then I heard it. Breathing not mine, raspy, wet, slow. Eyes still closed. My body told me to open them, to check. But something deeper, more primal begged me not to. I opened them anyway. No one was there. The room looked the same: chair, desk, window, shadow in the corner. But that shadow was thicker than usual. Not just the absence of light, but the presence of something. I stared at it, barely breathing. It didn't move, but it didn't need to. I blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, I told myself it was a dream. A trick of tired eyes. I hadn't slept well in weeks. Of course, I'd start seeing things. That's normal, right? But that night, it happened again. Only this time, the breathing was closer, louder. And when I opened my eyes, she was standing at the foot of my bed. She long black hair, pale, sunken face. No mouth, just a torn hole where it should have been. Her hands hung unnaturally low, fingers twitching. Her skin looked wet, like she'd been pulled from a well. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't lunge. She just stood there, like she was waiting. watching, tilting her head slightly, as if confused by me, and then I blinked, and she was gone. The next morning, I tried to leave the apartment. I packed a bag, told myself I'd go to a hotel, but when I opened the front door, there was nothing outside. No hallway, no neighbors, just black. I slammed the door shut, heart racing. Checked the window, same thing, beyond the glass, just void. Like the world had been erased. I was trapped. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept the lights on, drank coffee, walked in circles. But around 3:12 a.m., the lights flickered. My eyes burned from staying open, and I blinked. She appeared again, this time closer, by the side of the bed. I closed my eyes immediately, counted, prayed, waited. When I opened them again, the room was empty. I didn't dare sleep, and I began to realize, she comes when I blink, not just any blink, the last one before sleep. That moment when your mind lets go, that's when she comes. Every night after that became a battle. I covered mirrors throughout the bed, slept on the floor, it didn't matter. If I blinked even once with the intention of sleeping, she came, always closer. I tried sleeping with the lights on, then with recordings playing, then with a blindfold, but none of it helped. It wasn't about darkness. It wasn't about silence. It was about attention. She thrived on being seen, and, on that moment, you stopped looking. I started setting alarms to wake me every 30 minutes. But one night, I blinked too long, and when I opened my eyes, she was hovering over me. I felt her breath on my face. It smelled like rot. Her hand reached up, and slowly, gently, touched my cheek. Her skin was ice. I whimpered, and she smiled without lips, without a mouth. I blacked out. The next morning, I woke up on the ceiling. Yes, on the ceiling. Looking down at my own bed. Gravity was broken. I fell, but not onto the floor, onto water. Not cold water, thick like oil. I couldn't breathe. I kicked, fought, screamed, but no sound came. Shapes moved below me. Other people, other victims. Eyes wide open. All of them staring. All of them blinking. I woke up gasping, soaked in sweat, back in my room. But something had changed. I wasn't alone anymore. Now, she didn't only come at night. I'd see her reflection in spoons, in the turned-off TV, in the glass of a picture frame, always watching, always waiting, and if I ever blink too long, if I ever fall asleep, Aguna. No, she pull me into that place, where the others are, where time stops, where the last thing you remember is the feeling of being watched. So now I write. I write to stay awake. I write to remember. And I'm writing this for you, because if you've read this far, she knows you now too. Don't blink before sleeping. Not even once. Because if you do, she'll come, and she never leaves. It began quietly. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. Just silence. A peaceful kind. Like the world had hit pause on chaos. For the first time in months, I wasn't waking up gasping for air or drenched in sweats. My mind wasn't conjuring monsters or memories during sleep. No screams, no surreal nonsense, no colors, no darkness, blank. For 2 weeks straight, I slept like a stone. But then something changed. I wasn't dreaming anymore. Not even the strange kind. Not even fragments. Just this vast, heavy blackness behind my eyelids. And then, it started to follow me when I was awake. It began with moments. Little pockets of confusion, like walking into a room and forgetting why. Or looking at my hands and not recognizing them for a second. The kind of weirdness you brush off, telling yourself, you're just tired. But I wasn't tired. I had never slept better. And that's what made it worse. One evening, I was lying in bed reading when the hallway light flickered. Not just once, it pulsed slowly. Like breathing, inhale, exhale, inhale. And then it stopped. The light turned off. The hallway fell into a black void. I blinked. There was something standing in it. Not a shape, not a shadow, not a person. It was the suggestion of someone. Like your brain fills in something that isn't there. An outline. Faint, barely visible, like mist caught in moonlight. It didn't move, but I could feel it watching. I told myself it was stress. The silence of living alone, playing tricks. I shut the door and left a nightlight on like a child. But even with my eyes closed, I could still see the figure, standing just outside the bedroom. Its shape burned behind. My eyelids like an afterimage. I slept eventually, but not really. And that's when it began to escalate. I'd sit on the couch and suddenly feel as if I were sitting somewhere else. The floor beneath my feet would feel wrong, too soft or too hollow. Once I touched the armrest and felt fabric that wasn't mine. Velvet, scratchy, old. My own couch was leather. Sometimes, I'd glance at my reflection in windows and mirrors and catch it a second too late, a delay. Like the image was deciding what I should look like. Once, I swear my reflection was smiling when I wasn't. Things started moving. Keys weren't where I left them. My phone appeared on the bathroom sink, though I left it charging in the kitchen. One morning, I found muddy footprints in my hallway. Small, barefoot, not mine. I called my landlord. Had someone broken in? The locks were untouched. I installed a security camera. It faced my living room, set to detect motion. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my bedroom with the door locked. Lights on, a kitchen knife on the bedside table. Nothing happened. When I checked the footage, the next day, the recording had corrupted from exactly 3 a.m. to 3:17 a.m. It came back online at 3:18 and the living room light was on. I had turned it off before bed. The footage flickered one last time before ending. Just a frame, a single one. In it, a woman stood behind the couch, facing the camera. Her face was blurry, her hair long and dripping as if wet, her body too thin, almost stretched. She didn't belong. She wasn't supposed to exist. I screamed and slammed the laptop shut. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept the lights on, every one of them. I paced until sunrise. But I swear I saw her, in the hallway, in the corner of my eye, in the microwave's reflection. Her head always tilted, her eyes closed, but she was always facing me. I visited a neurologist. They scanned my brain, asked if I was depressed, if I had been exposed to mold, if I was under medication. But I was clean, healthy. You're just dreaming while awake, they said. It's called hypnagogia. But I'm not dreaming, I whispered. I've stopped dreaming. That's the problem. She came again the next night. But this time, I wasn't in my house. I woke up in bed, but the walls were pale green. The ceiling was high and cracked. The bed was iron rusted and cold. There were no windows. Just a mirror on the opposite wall and a single door, slightly open. I sat up, heart pounding. I wasn't home. I wasn't anywhere I recognized, and I couldn't wake up. I pinched myself. Screamed. Nothing worked. And then I heard it. The mirror cracking. Slowly a long, agonizing creak, as if something behind the glass was pressing against it. I ran to the door, locked. She stepped out of the mirror. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Her head hung to one side, her hair dripped like she'd come from water. Her mouth opened too wide. "I gave you peace," she whispered. "And now you see me." I begged, I cried. "I don't want this," I told her. "I want to go back." But she kept coming closer, crawling now, her limbs bending in unnatural ways. "Then dream," she hissed. "Dream, so I can sleep." I woke up screaming in my own bed. It was 3 a.m. The mirror across from me was cracked, one long split, from top to bottom. I stayed awake the rest of the night, rocking, crying, praying. Since then, every time I close my eyes, she's there, floating just beneath the blackness. Like a shark under still water, watching, waiting. She doesn't move unless I try to sleep, unless I try to dream. Now I don't sleep at all, but the longer I stay awake, the more this world starts to look like hers. The walls bend, the furniture blinks out and reappears. My reflection now follows me from mirror to mirror, smiling when I'm terrified, looking left when I look right. She left the mirror. She's inside now. And I know this. When dreams die, something else wakes up. Something ancient. Something tired of sleeping. And it's awake now, with me, inside me, forever. It started slowly, in pieces, like fragments of a dream that didn't belong to me. I didn't notice it the first few nights. After all, everyone snores. And my husband Daniel had always been a light snorer, usually soft enough to blend in with the hum of the fan or the ticking of the old wall clock. But then it changed. One night, I woke up at exactly 3:07 a.m. Not because of a night, not because of a nightmare, but because something felt wrong. Daniel was snoring beside me. But this time, the sound had a rhythm. Not a steady, sleepy rhythm, but short bursts followed by long ones. Pauses, repetitions. A pattern that my brain, still half asleep, tried to decode like a song stuck in a strange beat. It repeated, over and over, until he exhaled sharply and turned in his sleep, and the room fell silent again. The next morning, I joked about it over breakfast. "You snored in Morse code last night," I said, trying to sound amused. Daniel looked confused. What? You were making these short and long bursts, like ... kind of stuff. It was weird. He shrugged, sipped his coffee, and said, "Must have been a dream." But I knew what I heard. That night I recorded him. At 3:06 a.m., he began. I watched the recording the next day, earbuds in, heart thudding. The pattern repeated. 2 short snores, 1 long one. A pause, 3 shorts, another long, then silence. I wrote it down. ... I didn't know Morse code, so I searched it up. The first part translated to H then E, then L, then P. My mouth went dry. Help. Was Daniel trying to say something in his sleep? The next night, I didn't sleep. I lay still, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. When the clock ticked past 3 a.m., Daniel began snoring again. I wrote it down as fast as I could. It wasn't a single word this time. It was a full sentence. Help me stuck, not dreaming. The last line shook me the most. Not dreaming. What did that even mean? When I shook Daniel awake that morning, he didn't remember a thing. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked thinner, pale, like something was draining him slowly. I told him what the code said. He stared at me like I was telling him a ghost story. That's not funny, he said softly. I'm not joking, Daniel. I think someone is using your body, or trapped in your head. That's when things began to unravel. Daniel started sleepwalking. I'd find him in the living room, standing completely still, staring at the wall as though he was listening to something. Once, I found him at the front door, mumbling the word switch again and again. Another night, he was in the bathroom. Mirror, touching his reflection's face. And he didn't remember any of it. Then, I started dreaming. Not normal dreams, shared ones. In my sleep, I'd see a room. A gray room with no doors or windows. Just walls that pulsed like lungs. In the center of the room, lying on a stone slab, was Daniel. But not my Daniel. This one looked older, tired, stretched thin. He'd open his mouth and whisper, "Get me out." When I woke up, Daniel was right beside me, breathing calmly. Except, he no longer snored. I asked him, carefully, if he felt different. He looked at me with a blank face. No, I feel better, but it wasn't him. His voice was colder, his touch unfamiliar, his habits subtly different. The Daniel who had once hummed while making coffee, silent. The man who never liked reading, now absorbed in ancient books. The husband who loved warm baths, now took freezing showers at 3 a.m. I checked my recordings. The snores hadn't returned, but on one night, one strange night, there was a whisper on the audio right. Before the tape ended, a whisper that said, "He's inside now. I'm out." I deleted the file in a panic. I didn't know what to do, so I searched. Every forum, every message board, anything about possession, parallel dreaming, sleep Morse code. Most said I was insane. A few said to run. But one reply stuck with me. He might still be alive. Keep listening. He might be trying to take control back. So I waited. Until the night Daniel began snoring again. But this time, it was erratic. Frantic, like someone fighting. Trying to communicate through chaos. I decoded what I could. Stop him, not me. Mirror. Switch. I didn't sleep for the next 2 days. I started keeping a journal of his behavior. The thing inside him. It grew smarter. More Daniel. It smiled like him, laughed like him, even cried like him. But it wasn't him. I noticed it couldn't hold eye contact in the mirror. It flinched slightly at its own reflection. That was my clue. So tonight, I set up mirrors. In every room, I blocked the doors. I turned off the lights. I made him walk past every single reflection. At 3:03 a.m., he collapsed. Started convulsing. I screamed. Ran to his side. His eyes opened, pitch black. He gasped, mouth moving soundlessly. Then I heard it not from his lips, from the walls. A low humming snore, but rhythmic again. Morse. I ran to the recorder. I translated the line. Last chance. Then silence. He opened his eyes slowly and said, I saw you. You were in the dream. You were the only thing keeping me alive. It was him, the real Daniel. For now, but sometimes, late at night. He snores again, and I still write it down, just in case. Because one day, I fear the message will change again, and the next time, it might say, too late.